Hey guys, it's 90 degrees in Pittsburgh. It means it's got to be about 140 in Nashville, I think. But it doesn't matter because fall starts this weekend and college football starts this weekend. And that means the seventh season of the Carla and Crappy Show starts right now. Hi, Carla.
Hey, 7? Really?
7 years we've been doing this.
This is crazy.
And I don't think we ever have like actual fall weather for the first weekend, and that is certainly not the case. Is it actually 130, 40 in Nashville? That's my guess.
Sure as heck feels like it.
Okay.
We're pushing. Last I was outside, it was about 95 degrees outside. But yesterday, while I was walking across campus for the first day of the fall semester, nothing like ushering in a fall semester with heat indexes somewhere hovering around 105 degrees.
Oh man, that sucks.
Yes, I'm actually the professor that let my class out early on the first day because my classroom was so hot I couldn't bear it anymore. I was just like, I can't breathe, you can't breathe. Like, let's just stop here. We'll pick this up on Thursday and hope that maybe somebody fixes the air conditioning because it was just
below 100.
Yeah, it was pretty miserable. But yeah, it's fall.
None of it matters.
I can get a pumpkin spice latte across the street. Like that just, it's so weird. It's so weird.
It is weird, and I will be sweltering in Ohio Stadium at noon on Saturday. It's actually not supposed to be too bad. High in the mid 80s, so
that's not bad.
It's doable. I don't care. We get real college football to talk about, and we're past this awful off season. And maybe so to start with, since this is now a thing, we should start with our picks for the Final Four. Let's kind of go long distance here and see what we think how the season is going to end even before it begins. I'm gonna let you go first with this. So what do you think?
You're gonna make me go first. Okay. Yep. So we have this conversation every year now for the last 3 or 4 years that we've done this, picking the Final Four on the first week of the show. And I think if you went back and watched the last 3 years worth of first episodes of our seasons, you would hear me say the exact same thing. I'm going to keep putting Alabama in my Final Four until they give me a reason not to. So my Final Four, and actually that's true for a lot of things this year. I put Alabama in my Final Four because I don't have a reason to not put them in my Final Four yet. I put Georgia in my Final Four. Because after the near miss last year in the national title game, a lot of returners, Jake Fromm's coming back, DeAndre Swift, who picked up a lot of steam. He's the speedy little guy that kind of had a breakout in the national title game of all things. He's back. Now they lost their other 2 backs, but they have a killer offensive line. And I think that spells good things for Georgia. I think we're going to end up with 2 SEC teams again, and I'll explain why here in a second. My third team in is Clemson because Kelly Bryant and that defense. I think it comes out of the ACC. So yeah, we're looking a heck of a lot like we did last year. Bama, Clemson, and Georgia, and that left. And I feel pretty confident in those picks. Obviously, there's some. Clemson actually has some competition in the ACC this year, which could make things interesting. But I still think right now Clemson is the cream of the crop in the ACC, so I'll go with them, which leaves me 1 pick. And I've accounted for 2 SEC teams, even though I don't think they're the best conference in the nation. I think it just falls that way, that it's going to make sense to have both of those teams in. The Big 12 is kind of this year,
right?
And so. I immediately go and I look at the Big Ten because that's where my loyalties lie. And here's the thing: several years ago, I said something about the Pac-12, that the Pac-12 had a bunch of really good teams in it, and that they were all so comparable to one another that they were going to beat each other up and in turn play themselves out of the playoff because they wouldn't have one team that rose above the echelon that had the strength of schedule and the record to be able to say, yes, you're the champion of the Big Ten, you're going to the college football playoff. I think we're setting up for that exact same scenario this year in the Big Ten. If you look at the rankings, the preseason rankings, you have Ohio State at 4, who's been through a lot. You have a Michigan team that we'll talk about here in a bit. Yeah, nothing at all going on in Columbus these days. Michigan, which we'll talk about here in a second, at number 5. You have Wisconsin at number 9. And don't get me wrong, I love Jonathan Taylor. I mean, that's like the best Wisconsin running back. Like, that's perfect for that system. Will they be dominant enough to be able to win, have a solid enough record with a weaker strength of schedule because they play in the West? If they win the Big Ten title, is that a solid enough resume? I don't know. Penn State has a lot of good stuff going for them with McSorley back, but they're losing Saquon Barkley, and that's huge. Because if you've watched that offense, yes, McSorley has some nice targets, but who was his go-to guy to be able to get him out of situations? It was always Saquon. Or that obnoxious tight end that everything. Yeah.
So Gesicki, yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So, and they're both gone.
Yes.
And so I have questions about my Nittany Lions this year. Are they going to have a good season? Yes, they're going to have a good season. Are they going to make be a contender for the Big Ten title? I don't think so. I think they're going to be a really solid 9-3. Get a really nice bowl game, and I think that's a win for Penn State this year. And then you have Michigan State, who last year we had no idea who or what they were.
Right.
But you never count out a Mark D'Antonio coach team, right? So we have 4, 5, 9, 11, and 12. Are any of those teams going to rise to the crop this year? I don't know, and I don't think so. I think they're going to beat each other up and essentially play themselves out of the playoff, which opens a door for Washington. Yes.
Okay.
Because I think the Pac-12 is strong enough that we are able to argue strength of schedule. I think Washington is the team to beat in the Pac-12 this year.
Yes.
They've got the seniors behind them. And if you look at it, there are a few Pac-12 teams that are ranked, but they're not highly ranked. But I think that's going to be enough. If Washington can run the table, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, if Washington can run the table and win the Pac-12 title, I think they're in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a Washington team with that kind of resume is going to win out over a Big Ten team that could potentially have 2 losses walking into the Big Ten title game. So that's my 4: Bama, Clemson, Georgia, Washington.
Okay. If we had, I have Clemson. That was they're my first one in. That's easy. Alabama also second one in. I think also easy for the reasons you mentioned. If we had done the show like in June, when all the college football magazines come out and you see them on the stands, this would look really, really different. And my Buckeyes were pretty much consensus. I don't know that any of the stuff that I saw, back then, stuff that I've been reading over the summer, says it did not have Ohio State in the playoff. Obviously, some stuff has happened since then. Urban's not going to be on the coaching during games for the first 3 games of the season. I don't think that works out to be a big deal. I don't know what happens just kind of overall with the team, though. There's a lot of discussion about Urban not being happy with the suspension. Does that carry over? Does that have an impact on the team as we go through the season? No idea. And so, and then the point you make about the discussions we've had about the Pac-12 in recent seasons, that's a valid thing, especially if we're talking about the Big Ten East, which is just ridiculously tough. So, I'm as I look, I have questions about whether there's no question Ohio State has a talent to make the Final Four, but I have questions about how the season's going to go. So we're going to see about that. You wonder about Michigan, and we'll talk about them. Michigan State can, Penn State can. The one team that has an easier road because it's not in the Big Ten East is Wisconsin, and they've had the unfortunate thing of stumbling in the Big Ten title game pretty much every single year that they get there. So I'm thinking. I think this is the Big Ten East is going to be tough enough, and I think Wisconsin is good enough. Clearly, the best offensive line in the country. They will do what they do. Alec Honeybrook's been there for 14 or 15 years, so that's that kind of experience is a good thing. Even that he's not a flashy quarterback. But I wouldn't call him a game manager. I think he's better than that, and with the experience. That's going to be a really good team, and so Wisconsin is in, and then I couldn't look past Washington. Also, I think that's again a really good defensive secondary, especially that's a big deal in the Pac-12, and then the experience they have, Browning and Gaskin. I think they're going to be. They're going to be good enough to get through the season and make it to the playoffs. So Clemson, Alabama, Washington, and Wisconsin.
I hope you're right about Wisconsin. I would love to see that. The Big Ten West is always one of those things. I'm like, is that strength of schedule enough to get them in if you have a one-loss Georgia team? We don't know.
I did not look up their crossover games in conference, so I don't know about that. I expect Nebraska to not be a pushover as maybe they have been in the recent seasons. With Scott Frost being there, I think that program gets kind of turned around quickly. They're not title contenders. You still got to make up with talent and everything, but that's going to help Wisconsin in the maybe as soon as this year and certainly in the long run. So we will see what happens many shows down the road when we get to the Final Four at the end of the season. But we have actual games this weekend. Actually, there were games last weekend. There's a really good, I think it's a Purdue and Northwestern on Thursday night. Really stoked about watching that one while I'm at work. And then we have really good games this weekend. And we're going to talk about 3 of them, or sort of 3.5 of them, maybe.
There you go. Okay.
We're going to start on Saturday at 3:30 when my game will be wrapping up, and we will get home in time to watch a little bit of number 6 Washington at-ish number 9 Auburn. This game is in Atlanta, and Auburn is favored by 2.5 points. What do you think?
That's interesting. That's an interesting thing. Of course, you got the cross country flight. You have a Washington team that we've just put a whole heck of a lot of expectations on.
Yeah, right.
Walking into essentially a home game for Auburn for all intents and purposes. And it's an Auburn team that is incredibly comfortable playing in that environment because look at what they did last year. So I love this game because it's 2 really different styles going against each other. And we like to think about the offenses on both of these teams. Obviously you've got Browning and Gaskin for Washington. You've got Stidham returning from Auburn. But they're both kind of Auburn's dealing with something coming off of the offseason, and that is you have to wonder. So there was one team, and I thought about doing this, but I couldn't come up with a team that was worthy enough of putting them into the discussion for the college football playoff, and that was whether a group team would make the playoff this year after what happened with UCF last year. UCF running the table.
Yeah.
Who did they run the table against in their final game? Auburn.
There is that.
And so you have to wonder if Auburn is playing with a bit of a chip on its shoulder. Not that was a bad loss, because UCF proved itself it was a good football team. And deserve to be a part of the conversation. But you have to wonder if that stung a bit. And it stung throughout the entire offseason. And, Auburn's going back and playing in a really comfortable environment against a team that, they're favored, but they're really only favored because they're probably playing closer to home. They're getting a little bit of the home bias there. Loads of returners on both sides of the ball for the Tigers. And they have this incredible defense, which is going to be really interesting to watch and see how that matches up against the Washington offense. But you could say the exact same thing about the Washington defense pairing up against the Auburn offense, because Washington's defense is also incredible. I think this game means more to Washington than it does to Auburn for strength of schedule purposes. If you look at the rest of Washington's non-conference opponents, they're not playing a lot other than BYU. Not that then BYU can be a pretty good team as well. But Washington really needs this win to really kind of bolster its schedule. However, it wouldn't stun me to see Auburn win this game. And I still think it's possible for Washington to get in if they run the table the rest of the season and their only loss is to a good Auburn team. And I think this is going to prove to be a good Auburn team. So that being said, I can't pick this one. I'm leaning Auburn. And I'm leaning Auburn simply because of the home factor. They're going to come in playing with a chip on its shoulder. But man, this is going to be a fun football game to watch. And I'm really excited that we get a game like this with 2 teams that you don't really think about together. in week one in a really cool environment. But yeah, Auburn's playing too close to home. I think they have a little bit of the edge.
Okay. This is tough. And I, as I was sitting down trying to figure out my Final Four, obviously you guys know what the final results were, but either of these teams, you could make a case for Auburn being in that mix at the end of the season too. A lot of stuff would have to happen to get them there. Maybe they might need a little help, but they're good enough to be there. I look at this and the thing that I'm most intrigued this was a big thing for me when I picked Washington for the Final Four. They can physically hang with almost anyone in the country, and you don't actually. I don't see that out of Pac-12 teams very often. Stanford is frequently an exception, but this Washington team is too. I mean, I think about recent matchups between Ohio State and Oregon, and Oregon starts fast, and then by the third quarter, you just kind of see how this team is getting beaten and worn down. Maybe you saw a little bit of that with Southern Cal in the bowl game against Ohio State last year as well. But Washington can play that game and won't back down from a physical challenge. I'm gonna pick Washington in this one, and in part because I think you're correct in that it is a big deal to them. They may have some more the weight of expectations than Auburn does, and I think this is something where they kind of can grab a hold of their season on the first weekend and say this is going to be a year for us, so you'll pay attention, and it's not just going to be AJ watching these games for the rest of the year in the middle of the night. So I'm going to pick Washington in this first one. The one game I knew we had to talk about this weekend is at 7:30 on Saturday night. Number 14 Michigan at number 12 Notre Dame. Notre Dame is favored by 1. I thought about calling this the Overrated Bowl. I think maybe a better name would be the Prove It Bowl. But Carly, go ahead and tell me what you think.
Or somebody find an offense bowl.
There is that.
Yeah. Let's just not mince words here. Notre Dame is a team that needs some identity. They had a good season last year, but they but offensively they were just kind of all over the place. And they played well in the early part of the season, kind of trailed off in the second half of the season. It just never really clicked for them on offense for the entirety of the year. But on the flip side, their defense is great. They've got a really great defensive line.
Wait, which team are you talking about?
Exactly.
Hey.
Yeah. Same team. So Notre Dame has a really good defense. Defensive line is great. Secondary, a little questionable, but they didn't have any problems. They just didn't force any turnovers. They just weren't the preseason magazines that I was going through, made the point that there wasn't a player in the secondary for Notre Dame that had an interception all last year. And if you're looking at that, from a turnover perspective, then yeah, that's problematic. But you don't necessarily have to pick off the ball to make a good play. So take that for what it's worth. They didn't force turnovers, but I think they'll be okay. So they're gonna be good defensively. But that secondary is what Miami exploited last year,
right?
In the game that Miami just destroyed them. So the secondary does need some work. But they need to find an identity on the offense. We could say the exact same thing about Michigan. And here's what I love about Michigan, because of our fan loyalties. If this is your first time listening to the show, I was born and raised blue and white. Crappy's obviously a Ohio State fan, and so we both love to pick on Michigan. Let me pick on Michigan,
please. Go right ahead.
We said last year how many times Michigan needed an offense, until Michigan found an offense or showed us that they could play anything on offense, we were going to pick against them. So they decided to try to fix that. They fired their offensive coordinator. They hired Jim McElwain, who's exactly who I want to run my offense if I have a struggling offense. The Jim McElwain from the University of Florida. And how many times did we say last year that Florida didn't have an offense?
Yeah.
Because that seems like the perfect hire. And so they hired Jim McElwain and say, okay, he's going to come on and fix the offense. But then they don't officially name an offensive coordinator. The University of Michigan football staff does not have an offensive coordinator on its roster.
It's Jimmy.
Yeah, that's exactly how you fix an offense. Is you hire somebody who's not very good at offense. He's a defensive mind, and you put him in charge of the offense, but then don't give him the title, and so Harbaugh can make the play. I don't know what's going on. I'm fairly certain the players don't have any idea what's going on either, and I don't see that offense fixing itself until somebody says, okay, this person's in charge. Here's your quarterback, and this is the offensive scheme we're going to run. I haven't seen any of that out of Michigan this year. But same thing, defense could be great. They got 8 starters returning on defense. That defense was great all year. Their defense held them in games how long last year? I mean, that's really how they won games, was that they hung around long enough and their defense made a play, and that won them the game. Defense and special teams was how Michigan won last year. Probably the same thing this year. This game's in South Bend. 2 really great defenses. I'm going to pick Notre Dame in this game simply because they're playing at home. It might be the first team to 9 points wins. It really might. Because it's 2 defenses going to beat up on each other, and 9-6 Notre Dame wins.
Okay, and we get a score out of this one. That's outstanding. Brian, you hit on the thing about Brian Kelly that it's just his offenses are always like this. And I don't know if it's if he struggles to recruit quarterbacks that he needs that can actually run things. Brandon Wimbush, I mean, he racked up a huge yardage, but with a completion percentage below 500 last season. It's just kind of a mess to watch. And Notre Dame's defense, as the case with the folks in Ann Arbor, kept them in games, made that team probably more competitive than it should have been. Michigan's defense, it's might even be scarier looking than it did a year ago. Devin Bush and Rashawn Gary are legit terrifying front 7 guys. But that has not been Michigan's problem, which is it's nothing to say about Jimmy Harbaugh and the offense whisperer reputation that he has. Shea Patterson, everybody in the state up north thinks that he's going to be the savior. He transferred to Michigan from Ole Miss, and there's no question that he's an upgrade from pretty much anything that anyone that Harbaugh's had at quarterback since he's been in Michigan. But I don't think he's that good. Don't tell anybody. But I mean, he's better. You'll be the best quarterback that Harbaugh's had in Michigan. He was 3-4 as a starter last year at Ole Miss. And playing in the SEC, sure, that is a tough task. I'm not sure that that's any tougher than playing in the Big Ten East. Is. In the 7 games that he played, he threw 9 picks. I don't think he's that good. But what I think is going to happen, as far as this game goes, I think Michigan's defense is going to be just a bit better, and Patterson's experience. I think maybe Michigan gets to 9 points and they hold ND to 2 field goals, but I think Michigan's going to squeak out this one. And Jimmy better hope so. Jimmy better hope that Shea Patterson turns out the way everyone thinks he's gonna, because if he doesn't, Jimmy may be in trouble by the end of the season. Sunday, we have Sunday night football. That's why this weekend is awesome, because there's also a great game Monday. It's just the whole weekend. Blow everything off. Watch college football. It's gonna be awesome. 7:30. Number 8 Miami at Ish again. Number 25 LSU. This game is in Jerry World, and Miami is favored by 3. What do you think?
Miami, talk about a team that's coming in with a load of expectations this year. Sitting there with a nice top 10 preseason ranking. When was the last time that happened? I wanted to go look that up to see how long it's been since Miami was preseason ranked in the top 10. But there's a lot of interesting questions around Miami right now, particularly around who's gonna be under center. Malik Rozier had the job, was doing a fine job, and then Miami lost their last 3 games of the year, including their bowl game, and so everybody kind of scratched their heads, and the fan base is kind of soured on the kid. And so now there's he'll probably get the start this weekend, but
this is a Miami fan base that wants to win. It's been a while since they've been in the national conversation. They're right on the cusp of this, and you got to think that the pressure is incredibly high in this game. Miami defense took over, lots of fun memes last year with the turnover chain,
Yes,
and they do a great job at turning the ball over. They forced turnovers. That was the hallmark of that was what they were known for all year last year. I think they're going to be able to do the same thing this year. This is a head scratcher matchup, right? You go just like, the Washington Auburn, you're like, how does that work? And I say that even more for this matchup, Miami and LSU. How does that work? Because they're two completely different styles of play. And so it's how is that, I was looking at how this would potentially match up, but then it occurred to me that it shouldn't have taken me this long to figure this out. Mark Richt happens to know a whole heck of a lot about coaching in the SEC.
You might remember a thing or two.
Yeah. So the whole ACC, more kind of the speed pro style offense against an LSU team that tends to be known a little bit more for its defense, and a little bit more of a ground. They're a little more ground and pound than a typical ACC team would be. That plays well in Mark Richt's favor, that he's going to understand the way that works. LSU is a team that this episode is like the identity crisis episode. Like LSU is a team that needs an identity.
Who am I?
Who am I? What am I going to be? So they hired Edo last year, and that was like the sentimental hire, and everybody was like, yeah, okay. And we're all scratching our heads just a little bit. And then you start reading about what's going on in the offseason at LSU, and Orgeron wants to install a pro-style offense. Does he realize he's at LSU? Like, a pro-style offense might not be the best move in the SEC West. I'm just saying.
Maybe not.
When you're, I don't know. That just
a couple of years into a transition, maybe.
Right? Like, I'm scratching my head. Like, why would you install a pro-style offense in the SEC West? And so, if that's really where LSU is going, if this game was in Death Valley, then okay, yeah, let's have a conversation about Miami coming in playing in Death Valley, and I think that would be a heck of an atmosphere and one heck of a way to start this game. Being a neutral site in Jerry World, even though it's closer to LSU and there will be more LSU fans there, I think that wipes the atmosphere out of the equation for LSU. I think Miami has a more clear trajectory of what it's trying to do. It has some things that needs to clean up. It needs to kind of solidify its offense a little bit. But I think there's a much clearer path forward for Miami right now than there is for LSU. And so I'm not going to take LSU. I'm going to take Miami in this game. And I think they could win this game pretty handily if their offense fires the way that we knew that it could earlier in the season last year.
Okay. By the way, our friends at the Associated Press say this is the first time that Miami's been ranked in the preseason top 10 since. Do you have a guess?
I want to say like the early 2000s. It's got to be like 2002 to 2003, something like that.
I'm going to give you that. 2004.
Nice.
2004 was the last time. I'm going to preview this game by talking about Ohio State quarterbacks because that's just sort of who I am. I've been seriously waiting for years for the chance to see Joe Burrow get meaningful time under center, and I didn't think it would be in an LSU Miami game, but here we are. Burrow was a product of Athens High School in southeastern Ohio. I believe he was a Mr. Football. He was pretty highly recruited. More of a pro-style guy than would typically someone that like the Urban would look at, but solid all the way around. And then he's there at the same time that JT Barrett is there, and Braxton Miller's there, and then looking at this season, he had a great spring camp. He was in Columbus for spring practice, and was perhaps the best quarterback in the spring game. But I think perception, certainly on his part, and it's probably accurate, that he had too much ground to make up to catch Dwayne Haskins, who saw a fair amount of playing time, including in the game against Michigan last year. So he started chopping himself around, landed in Baton Rouge. The cool thing for my friends who are LSU fans is you're going to enjoy seeing a quarterback who can throw the football to receivers and stuff. I'm not sure that that's going to happen. It's going to that that's going to happen to the degree that they need it to have to beat Miami. I think Miami's going to win this game, but I think it's going to be interesting. And the notion that that Eddie O would install a pro style offense, well, it's sort of a head scratcher. Burrow's suited to that. I mean, they have him. They only have him for a season, and I hope he's not doing this just in as a one and done kind of thing. I hope LSU has quarterbacks in the pipeline that could carry this forward if that's the route they take. But this weekend, not enough, I don't think. But it should be an interesting thing. I will watch a few LSU games just to kind of see how Joe's doing. Finally, we have one more game to discuss briefly. It is the Greater Nashville Knockdown. It's the Mid Tennessee Melee. It's the punch out for the J. Percy Priest Reservoir, which kind of sits between Nashville and Murfreesboro, which is the home of Middle Tennessee State, Carla's employer, which visits Vanderbilt in Nashville on Saturday night. And Vandy is favored by 3 points. And Carla, is this the year for the Blue Raiders?
Here's the thing. If this isn't the year, it's not going to happen for a while. It's Brent Stockstill's senior season. It's the first game of the year, so he's healthy, which has been a problem with him. He's been very injury prone. He missed a good chunk of the season last year. But he's an outstanding quarterback if he can stay healthy. MTSU could actually play well in Conference USA, but and it's Vandy. And we never know for sure. I know that
you don't have any idea.
No, we don't, and that's just kind of the way that Vandy is, and everybody's okay with that. That's just life in Nashville and football. It's just if MTSU is going to beat Vanderbilt, this is the year they have to do it. So I am officially donning my blue and saying, "Go Blue Raiders! Do it this year. Beat Vanderbilt."
I'm picking the Blue Raiders. Absolutely. I don't know why, but do you get to go to the game? Because you have no commitments this season, correct? That interrupt.
Yeah, that's true, because this game is on Saturday for once.
Yes.
This game is not interrupting my choir practice. We normally have a problem at the church that I go and sing at is across the street from Vanderbilt's football stadium, and so they sell our parking lot for people that are going to games.
And Carla has to take a helicopter.
Pretty much. Although we had to do that last week because we had a Beyonce concert at Vanderbilt Stadium, and so it was almost as bad. It was worse because there were more people that went to the Beyonce concert than went to the Vanderbilt home opener. Yeah. So it was bad last week. But yeah, no, this game's on Saturday, so that's fun. I don't know. I haven't decided if I'm going yet or not. If it's 96 degrees like it is today, probably not. I'll watch it from the comfort of my home where I have air conditioning.
Yes.
But you better believe I'll be wearing my blue.
Great. Guys, that is week one of the Carla and Crappy Show. I would say cheers, except we both had to tape this in the daylight hours, so our beverages aren't quite as adultish.
No. I've got passion fruit LaCroix.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
That's pretty crazy.
I'm crazy on the afternoon.
I just have some water and I have to work tonight, so I'm going to go take a nap. But we will back and resume our normally scheduled drinking for week 2.
And I'll get out of this closet.
And Carly will not be in her closet. And we'll have more college football to talk about. Thank you guys for watching again. And we will see you then. Thank you.